Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, teachers and other education professionals have had a huge influence on our lives. But first, how about this? The big stories of the week with two of the state's leading journalists. As they say, let's get to it.
Welcome to the fast-paced and unrehearsed weekly discussion featuring the leaders who help shape your world. Join us as we address the issues that impact you each and every day. This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, I'll tell you, we have multiple lawsuits going on in the state of Pennsylvania. We have the increase in coronavirus, particularly in the schools. Hospitals are having some difficulties. And then the fall legislative agenda. We have a full agenda on this program. Sitting across from me, as often is the case, are two journalists, Angela Couloumbis, she's with the Philadelphia Inquirer and Spotlight, PA, and Marc Levy, he's with the Associated Press. Welcome again, both of you. I'll tell you, Marc, I'm going to start with you. One lawsuit after another, you almost can't keep track of them, and so far, I don't think the Trump campaign, who's been filing these lawsuits have made some kind of big inroads. Would you agree with that?
Right. They haven't really won anything yet in terms of getting votes thrown out or overturning the result of the election, but they are trying. They do have a lawsuit in federal court in Harrisburg. Actually, it's being heard in Williamsport that essentially wants to undo the result, the margin that Joe Biden is currently holding in the vote count in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I mean, some of these lawsuits, Angela, have, one had to do with whether their poll watchers were really poll watchers, meaning they were so far away they didn't know what's going on, and they worked out a compromise on that. But we also have the differences between in-person voting and mail-in voting, and Republicans argue that mail-in voters have special privileges and that they don't have. And so that's another huge law aspect. And then you have this 3 days, the infamous 3 days.
Right.
Go ahead.
Well, I see these lawsuits targeting three fundamental batches of votes, right? The first one is what you mentioned, the 3 days, the ballots that arrived after polls closed on Election Day and within the 3 days of that. And that was sanctioned by the state's Pennsylvania's highest court. It was sanctioned as part of the fact that we are operating in a pandemic and we have a slow U.S. Postal Services. So that 3-day extension was allowed. So that piece is being now challenged by the Trump campaign and Republicans. You also have these so-called cured ballots. Yeah. People, election officials on Election Day, as they were processing the ballots, they were providing information, and that is also sanctioned by the state, to political parties about ballots that were inaccurate or somehow filled out inaccurately. Those voters were contacted and were able to go and vote in person through a provisional ballot. Those have also been a very big point of focus for the Trump campaign. And now we're seeing in the county courts in particular, we're seeing batches of ballots that either, lack a clear signature or some sort of deficiency that are being challenged.
Yeah, Marc, this could go on for some time. I mean, December 14th is a critical day because that's when the Electoral College meets. And I guess the judges in these cases are acutely aware of that. And my sense is they're going to try to get these lawsuits resolved before December 14th, when the Electoral College meets to officially elect the President of the United States.
Sure, and even before that, we have November 23rd as the deadline for counties to certify their election result to the state so that the state can then go over that and do its own process with it in terms of certifying and canvassing. But look, the lawsuits are big. The one that the Trump campaign filed in federal court is 80-some pages. There's another one that was just filed in federal court that basically seeks the same result, is to undo ballots in Democratic counties where Biden won. There's a lot of lawsuits in the counties that are seeking to throw out certain categories of ballots, and judges are under pressure to either hear these or dispense of them quickly. And it may be that all roads lead to the state Supreme Court and the U.S. Supreme Court. And, that's a message that the president has constantly trotted out, that this will be decided by the U.S. Supreme Court, and we know that there are 6 conservatives there and 3 liberals.
Yeah. Well, the fact of the matter is that there are multiple lawsuits in many other states, so this thing has a long way to go. I'll tell you what, let's run to a break. When we come back, there's been this huge increase in coronavirus, not just in Pennsylvania, but in something like 20 states, and it's having a huge effect, particularly in the schools. All right, we'll be back after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Well, coronavirus has had a huge effect on our schools. I'm going to ask Angela Couloumbis about this. All kinds of reactions in the schools from, well, I'll let you get into the details. Go ahead.
Well, since the start of the school year, various school districts have put into place how they want their schools to run. We are not under the statewide school shutdown that we saw last spring. But what we're seeing is a consistent rise in daily new cases of coronavirus. And yesterday, the state's largest teachers union came out and urged schools that are in counties that are experiencing a very high rate of transmission to go all virtual and to follow state guidance on that front. You also saw a major children's hospital in Philadelphia come out and actually urge school districts in that area to go virtual for a certain number of weeks until cases can come back under control. The Wolf administration has been asked whether they are thinking and planning to call for a statewide shutdown. They have said pretty much that they are not. But I think we are going to start hearing messages from them that their school districts should proceed with caution.
Yeah, some states have done the shutdown, increased their limitations on gatherings of people. Well, look, Mark, I don't think there's any doubt that it's had a profound effect on schools, but now I keep reading reports about what's going on in hospitals. They're getting filled up and they're transferring hospitals under great pressure again.
Right. So to the extent that there's skepticism about whether rising case numbers are determinative or important, we do know that hospitalizations are way up in November. We know that deaths are way up in November. Delaware County yesterday put out a warning saying that its emergency room waits are a lot longer because of coronavirus, and their hospitals are now having to divert ambulances. And so it's starting to sound serious for hospitals in some areas.
Yeah, and when you listen to the folks nationally who talk about this, in addition to Dr. Fauci and others, they say this is going to go on this is going to go on not just for days, but for weeks and perhaps for a couple of months, right?
Yes, everybody keeps trying to prepare the public for a very difficult fall and winter season. That eventually there will be a vaccine, but that the first available time period of vaccine would be available to the general public. We're looking at maybe May of next year.
Made the stock market go up, that's for sure. All right, Mark, let's talk about another subject. The legislature has an agenda for the fall. But let's start with the fact that the Republicans still control the legislature.
Right. They are coming back with the same majorities, if not slightly bigger. There's still some vote counting going on in some of these districts. But we're coming off an ugly election season in which Republicans are angry about how election law was handled. They're already commissioning hearings into the election. In the meantime, we have a budget that was only funded through 5 months of this fiscal year. So that means on November 30th, when the legislative session ends, funding ends for a lot of major programs in the state budget. Now, some of that funding may go on because it's covered under court decisions or federal rules.
Sure.
But the point here is that at last check, the state was, billions of dollars in the hole through this fiscal year.
Right.
And if lawmakers and the governor don't get together on fixing it, it'll become a major problem in the spring.
We're almost out of time, but they're probably not going to do any big items. They're probably just going to do what they have to, and as they say, get out of Dodge, right?
Absolutely. I think budget and changes potentially to, or audits of the election process are what's going to be on the agenda, top of the agenda.
All right, as always, thanks for coming in. Certainly appreciate it. All right, teachers and other education professionals have had a profound influence on our lives. We'll get to that topic in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Cross-State Credit Union Association. Credit unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, go to ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit about education and its significance. Coming up is American Education Week. Joining me to chat about that is Joe Welch. He's the PSEA's, imagine this, Pennsylvania's Teacher of the Year. He's on the faculty at North Hills, which is just a little outside of Pittsburgh, about, 6 miles or so?
About 6 miles north of the city of Pittsburgh.
I got that. Every now and then I know something. All right, let's get down to serious business. Look, we all know that teachers have had a profound effect on students. I spent decades in the classroom, and I'll be out traveling somewhere and someone come up and say, I was in your class, blah, 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 and I want to tell you how that made a difference in my life. I'm sure you get that too, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's a tremendous feeling whenever a former student or a former parent comes back and they share with you that, you made a difference in their life. And as a teacher, that's what I think we all are striving to do.
Oh, yeah. Oh, make no mistake about it. That when they say that to me, that's more important than actually a title, and it's really significant because of the positive impact that teachers and other education professionals have on people's lives.
That's 100% accurate, and I think that, and I often hear this phrase that teaching is not a career; it's an identity. And when I hear it phrased that way, and I think about all of my colleagues and everything that we're doing to be there for students and to connect with them, really makes it such a rewarding. It's a career, but it really is an identity.
Oh, you're right about that. Well, look, let's talk about American Education Week. It's coming up. Why have American Education Week? I'll put it that way.
Well, Terry, first I want to thank you for the opportunity to talk about American Education Week and to be here to do so. But every November, just before Thanksgiving, we like to stop and pause and celebrate American Education Week, which is coming up next week. And I think this year more than ever, it gives us this opportunity to reflect on the great things that educators are doing in our classroom. And especially a challenging year. I think we need to also thank the parents and community members that are also stepping to the plate to make sure that we're certainly connecting with students, but we're finding ways for them to continue to find success.
Well, I'll tell you something. When you're in the classroom, you sort of have to rethink. I don't know if it's totally the pandemic, but and I hear from my colleagues at the college where it's really not easy to do remotely for a whole variety of reasons.
Well, it's definitely a challenge, and I think that's probably the best word for it. But we've been able to rethink the ways that we're doing things inside the classroom. I started off this school year looking at 30 desks, and I had to introduce terms like social distancing and thinking about what's the best way to design my classroom for my students? But this was actually an opportunity. And I didn't want students to come in and feel, if we're in a hybrid schedule, to feel like they're in an empty classroom. So a few trips to the hardwood store or hardware store in my community, was able to get some historical posters and actually fill my room as a history teacher with different historical characters. And that led to a conversation, why am I sitting next to Frederick Douglass? Or who's Harriet Tubman? Or who's Ulysses S. Grant? And when you put that all together, it initially was to fill some space, but it led to some great discussions about inclusion.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. And when you try to do it, some remote, and then you go back in the classroom, the back and forth, boy, it is not easy. All right, I want to turn to another subject: the world as our classroom. I've never heard that before. That expression. So what is? And I know there's some video coming up here. So the world is our classroom. Explain that. What's that mean?
Well, sure. That's a phrase that sometimes has been thrown out there in the world of education. But so in North Hills, we're on a hybrid schedule for 4 days a week. That means I have students in my class 4 days a week. But every Wednesday, we're virtual. So I have my live classes, and this initially was a challenge, but it presented an opportunity for every Wednesday for me to take my classes somewhere. Whether it was a historic site in Pennsylvania, like in Fayette County, going to
I want to interrupt you there. I wonder who that guy is.
Oh, well, look at that handsome guy out there. But that's actually at Fort Necessity National Battlefield, or just last week, celebrating Veterans Day, going to the National Mall in Washington, D.C., and checking out the World War II Memorial. And this is all about connecting with students and giving them opportunities that they may have not had in the past.
Yeah. Well, obviously, the pandemic has sort of limited, the tours, I'll put it that way, the education tours. How's that? Where it's a great learning experience for students.
Absolutely. And I think they appreciate it, and it's showing literally and figuratively that, teachers are willing to go the extra mile for them.
All right, we're going to run to a break. When we come back, we have another important topic or two to take up. I'm just checking here. Authentic learning experience. How important is that?
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine.
Well, let's talk about an authentic learning experience. That's the first time I've actually heard that term. Take it. Well, I mean, what's authentic and what's not authentic? No, let's just do authentic. What are the elements of it?
Well, it's really just looking for opportunities to allow students to have a real life experience and to engage them in such an experience. And so at North Hills Middle School, one of the ways that we've been able to do that this year, albeit a challenge, was, every 4 years we have our building-wide mock election, just like many schools do, but we try to make it as authentic as possible, where students, they're registering to vote, they're registering for their party. If they maybe have an error on their registration, they get a provisional ballot. It's just like real life. But
and you haven't been sued?
we want to make sure we're following all of the laws there. Yeah. But that's really a situation this year where we have some students that are virtual, some students that only come 2 days a week. And so we wanted to make sure that we kept this experience available to all students. Yeah. So as a result, we mailed home about 100 mail-in ballots, just like in real life. We had student volunteers actually over an election that lasted 2 days. We had some early voting that allowed 750 students to vote in person. And it was all student-run, student-organized.
So that's authentic. I got it now. But I'll tell you, that has to be a great learning experience for students to learn how the education process takes place. Do you have, I don't want to call them debates, but do you have back and forth on issues and candidates?
Oh, certainly. Students, one thing about 13 and 14-year-olds, they love to share their opinions, just like adults love to share their opinions. Yeah. And to have that chance for them to learn how to do it and to support it, most importantly, with evidence, was certainly a key part of that election process.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, there's something else that I think is important, and that is, given the pandemic and what's going on and how you've adjusted your learning experiences, you had to find new ways to connect with students, to develop a relationship that really encourages learning.
Well, that's absolutely true. And that's where I'm amazed by so many of my colleagues. So whether it was the mock election or going out to these historic sites or putting things in your classroom, I've also been able to work with colleagues at my local PBS affiliate, WQED Pittsburgh, to put together materials for students all the way from kindergarten all the way up through seniors in high school, and put these materials together for students that may not have technology at home or may not have an internet connection. And through that partnership, we were able to put these lessons together that are broadcast over the air for all students. So I think that's what we're doing. We're trying to reach all students.
Yeah. But there's also, I mean, there's something called equity in our schools. That's what you do with WQED, correct?
Absolutely.
And reaching out to different people under these circumstances has to be different. I mean, not just different, but difficult, I would add as well.
No, that's true. I think the pandemic has shown that there are so many districts in Pennsylvania and so many different environments that we may find our students in. And I think that's what educators do. We're going to meet our students where they are, and we're going to show that resolve to show them, no matter what your situation is, we're here to help you out. We're here to assist you. And that's the quality of a great school and a great teacher.
Yeah, and I would imagine the challenge here is that you have some students that will not have internet available to them for a variety of reasons. Some socioeconomic considerations have to be taken into account, and how you make that equitable is really, it has to be a serious challenge. And when you assign homework virtually, do they do it? Do they get help? I mean, it's gotten extraordinarily complicated.
Well, I think it's finding a balance, and you're absolutely right. It's complicated because we have students that don't all have the same resources, unfortunately. That's where teachers are, certainly equity is a key component of that, but I think every teacher has always been flexible. And that's one of the most important elements of being a teacher, of looking at what your student has and what they need and how you can still do it.
I'll tell you, maybe the pandemic has had one positive effect, and that's that you're now getting into experiments and rethinking how education works and what matters and what doesn't matter, correct?
Correct. And I think innovation during any time of struggle, as a history teacher, you think back to all of the innovations that have happened during wars or during eras of depression. And I think this is an opportunity to rethink all of how we've done education and how we've educated students. And after this, and hopefully we get over this pretty quickly, we're able to keep those positive things and keep those positive elements that we found that are working.
All right. Well, look, I want to thank you for coming in, and congratulations on Teacher of the Year and on teaching history. I did that for a number of years. We'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And as always, stay well. Don't go.